Hello and welcome to Artwork, a conversation with creative people about the joys, the challenges and the mundane moments of living an artistic life. We're your hosts, I'm Poppy Rose.
And I'm Brie Robertson.
And our artist today is Alice Hills, a well-known musician in the Berlin folk scene.
I first met Alice when I visited Berlin 5 years ago while still living in my husband's hometown near Dusseldorf. She was hosting the Offen Mic Night at Offenbar, a special hub for independent musicians finding their feet in Berlin. It's also the place where I met you, Poppy. Sadly, it's now closed, but what a special place it was for artists getting started in this new city. Thank you, Dario.
Alice Hills started her musical journey performing on the rough, competitive streets of Berlin when she was only 16 years old. But over the years, busking has shaped her musical style, her performance, and her voice. And even now, over a decade on, performing on city streets all over the world has been her main source of income.
In this episode, she shares some really practical ideas and advice for anyone wanting to try street performing, how she's motivated by the beautiful connections sharing her music allows her to make with passers-by, and how Alice has managed to create her own path in the music industry.
Alice also tells us about her new jewellery endeavour, which she's been working on since COVID has affected her travel and music plans.
Let's dive in! Alice, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today because you were actually one of the first musicians that I met here in Berlin. I visited Berlin like 5 years ago while I was still living in my boyfriend's village, and I was trying to figure out if it was going to be possible for me to build a life in Berlin. So I visited for a couple of days just to test the waters. And I was researching open mics and places that I could meet musicians in the city. And I found the open mic that you were hosting at the amazing Offenbar, which was such a wonderful space for all of us back in the day.
I missed that place.
I know.
Me too.
Yeah, and I saw you and I researched you and I was like, oh my gosh, I think this girl is doing exactly what I want to be doing. I'm going to go to her open mic and meet her. And it was such a good night, and it kind of opened up the music scene, the folk independent music scene for me for when I moved back a few months later and made Berlin my home. And so we've kind of known each other over the years, seeing each other at different music events, and I've always admired the hard work that you have done year after year, just sharing your music with the world, and we're so excited to share your story today.
Thank you.
The first question I want to ask you, and Poppy and I have both got lots of questions we want to ask today.
Yes, plenty.
But the first question I want to ask you is, what inspired you to start busking on the streets of Berlin as a teenager?
Well, so back in the day, I was still a student. I was doing my Abitur, but I was still 2 years away from it. And it was summer holidays, and I just come back from a language travel to London. And as things go, London is, of course, very expensive. And I asked my parents for money in advance, for pocket money to do my London trip and to spend money there. And as it happened, I spent all my money. So when I got back, I still had 3 weeks in the holidays left, and I was completely broke. And so I asked my mom, hey, can I have some more pocket money? There was a movie that I really wanted to see in a cinema, and I had €3 to my name. And she was like, no, you've spent it all. This should be a lesson about managing your money better. And so I was dead bored, and then my mom said, you should do a summer job, because when I was a child, we used to do summer jobs. And I was like, Mom, those don't exist anymore. We don't live back in the day. It's different. I ended up working this horrible call center job, which was soul destroying. And I only did it because they originally said that after a week I would be paid But then they never, like after 8 days of working there, they didn't pay me. So I was like, so that's the only reason I started working here. Where's the money? And they said, well, you're going to have it on your bank account in 3 to 4 weeks. And that wasn't fast enough for me because I was under a bit of time pressure there. So I quit that day and I walked home and I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And then there was my guitar in my room and I just thought, well, yeah, I might as well try busking. And so I took my guitar and I went to Alexanderplatz and I played opposite of the World Weltzeituhr, the clock, and I just played acoustically for like 2 hours and I made like 16 euros, which for me was a lot of money at the time because I didn't have any. And like it wasn't like a lot of people that listened to me because I didn't really know how to project my voice very well, and also like this was like a lot of city noise around and I was just acoustically with a guitar. So in the end, I was still very happy about the experience, though. I really felt like the people that did stop and listen, that really connected with me. So a few weeks later, it was my birthday, so I asked for an amplifier for my birthday, and that's when it really started. So from then on, I started busking like at least twice a week, and that continued until I finished high school, pretty much. So that's how I got started. It was pretty much just summer holidays, lack of money, and a bit of desperation. And yeah, that's how I got started.
Wow. Oh my God.
Amazing. I didn't know that story. Thank you so much for sharing that. What an incredible journey to get to start busking, and then that has kind of become your life, and a really huge part of your life and a huge part of your journey. And so obviously you said you kept going back, you kept going busking. What made you keep going back to the streets to sing and share your songs?
I really enjoy how direct busking is. Like, you don't have to plan in advance. You can just, whenever you feel like it, when the weather is nice, and you just, feeling the vibe, you just get out there and you can immediately connect with people. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what I always loved about it, that like there wasn't any administration or any like pre-planning. You are really able to be as spontaneous as you want to be. and and yeah, it really enabled me. I think the connecting part was like the most important thing to me, to like connect with people and like share my music and share my story, and being appreciated for that, because when I was in school, like I was bullied for many years and I didn't really have a lot of self-esteem, and getting out there and busking really gave me so much back, like feeling appreciated, feeling valued, that I didn't know that I, was valued like that before. So I think as much as I gave, I also received.
That's beautiful. I definitely have like tried the busking thing here in Berlin. And I have to say that it takes a lot of guts
Mm.
to like pack up your equipment, leave your apartment, and try and find a place where you just decide, okay, this is where I'm going to sing, and you set up your equipment and just start playing. And you have no idea if people are going to stop. You have no idea if you're going to take any money home that day. There could be a lot of personal like mindset challenges to overcome to get to actually playing the music. Did you find that over the years that you had to overcome some fear? Were you nervous at any points? What were the challenges that you found of like getting out there and hitting the streets each day?
I actually still get nervous, like, especially when I haven't gone out for a little while, or it's a new spot that I'm trying, or even sometimes when it's a spot I've done 100 times. Like, I still get this little bit of like, butterflies in my stomach before I play, setting up. All of those take time, all of those things, and like even getting there, like on the way, like on the train or whatever, you might have interactions with people that might not always be so pleasant. What I used to do, like what I try to do is like I always listen to my music and I really try not to let anything or anybody around me affect like my mindset, to really get in the zone and just be centered within myself, because I think, yeah, it really does affect you mentally. And also, I think what I found is when you have too high expectations, or maybe too, yeah, you're not feeling well mentally, that can really affect your performance. So I try always to not have any expectations, if that makes sense. I always try to like not say, oh,
Mhm.
I'm going to make that much money, because you're just going to be disappointed if you don't. And you can't really influence those factors because, yeah, like you said, everything that you do with busking really depends on the people that do just happen to walk past you when you play, and whether or not you can make them stop and listen and take time out of their day to connect with you. Because that's what it is in the end of the day, like whether they're open to connect with you or not, and whether you can sort of make them understand that your music is valuable in that way, and that it does deserve to be taken in and listened to. And so I think it has a lot to do with like how you interact with people as well. Like I really find for me it makes a huge difference when I talk to people, like when I tell them about my songs and my experiences, because people really connect with that. And I think especially when you do play original songs that people don't know, they can't really connect with it otherwise, unless you do tell them like how to connect with it or give them some background information. And I do find that people tend to stop when I'm talking about my songs, actually, a lot of the time.
I'm imagining that maybe there are some people listening to this who enjoy stopping and watching buskers, or maybe there are some people listening to this who are maybe thinking of trying it themselves. So I'd love to hear maybe like what a typical busking set might be for you. How do you kind of structure it, or what is your performance on the streets? What does it look like?
So usually I prepare the backdrop. I have all my things set up, like my suitcase with my sign. Like I make everything look pretty in advance, because I think presentation is a big part of like how I want people to perceive my act. It's not just about the music, but it's the whole thing, like the visual stimulation as well. So I always try to keep it neat and nice looking. And then I start usually oftentimes with a cover, because I find it sort of takes the edge off for you personally, because like it might be covers that you've done a million times and you know people like. And so I usually start with that, something easy listening, something like sort of chill, like a chill cover that people sort of know, to first get them engaged, because people do tend to give you more attention when they already sort of are familiar with a certain song potentially. So that's how I usually open my show, and then I start transitioning to my original material and start talking about my songs. And I usually do this thing where I start with my mellower, like more mellow songs, and then I sort of um, increase, let's say, um, the momentum or whatever. I usually then start playing more upbeat songs towards the end of the set, and yeah, and that's how I do it. And it's really interesting because I think I do have a lot of more mellow songs, but I also have a fair amount of more upbeat songs, and just mixing both of that, it sort of attracts a different crowd sometimes. But I think the people that really do enjoy it, they stay for the whole set, and it's really nice to feel valued in that way, because like they don't have to listen, they don't have to stop, and they're on the way somewhere, they're like doing something. I'm just sort of just happen to be there, and they're taking time out of their day to, yeah, to appreciate what I do, which is
Yeah.
really nice.
That's amazing. How long is your normal set? Like how long do you normally play for? Because I did a bit of street music when I was living in Berlin, and I found it really exhausting, like emotionally, mentally, physically as well, because you're carrying everything and having to travel, into Mitte, into the central part where there's more tourists and things. So yeah, how long do you normally play for?
So my standard set is about between 45 and 55 minutes, I guess. um I used to always do 45, and then set up and set down would be like 15 to 20 minutes. So I'll be sort of finished within an hour. Now, if the spot isn't taken by any other performer, I sometimes try to do another set if um, especially if the first set wasn't that great. Sometimes, if you have a really, really good set, I like to end it on a high note and just be like, yeah, that was a really good set. I don't need to do another set because I'm just happy with how it was, because I don't want to sort of ruin the positive that I just experienced just in case. Um, but then if I don't feel like I've it made it worth my while, then I try to play another set. If I can't play a set there, I'll try to find another like spot to play somewhere close by. And so I have a bit of like a potential route that I do when I can, when the world isn't as crazy as it is currently. So I usually also do it in Mitte. I used to go out in the afternoons. I'd do Museum Island or outside Lustgarten, like outside the Berliner Dom sometimes. And then I'd go somewhere else from there, depending on how I feel.
Did you find it exhausting, like doing that much street music in one day, or did it give you energy? Did it give you so much life and vibrancy from performing and from doing it?
It's definitely exhausting physically. Doing like one set like already feels like you really like have just done an hour workout pretty much. And also like carrying all your gear there is definitely also very exhausting. Um, but then on the other hand, like when you do it every day, you're sort of pretty fit when it comes to that. I found usually like I'm really fit in the summers and whenever I do play pretty much every day. But yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine doing it right now. I'd probably be a lot more exhausted now than I would be usually.
Totally, I know. Like a normal work week or a normal week that we would have thought was a breeze a couple of years ago feels so unimaginable now.
I know.
You grew up playing street music as a teenager, and I wonder, is it something that you thought would become your full-time job as an adult, or at what point did you realize, like, I love this is going to be my life and this can actually make me a decent living? When did that shift happen for you?
I think it happened fairly quickly. I was doing really well from busking, and it was already like a really solid income, especially because when I first started playing on the street, there wasn't really any competition because it wasn't like a scene. The scene only really started after I started, and then people like I actually gave a lot of people tips and advice at the time because I was also like, I wanted to share the spots because it got really boring if you'd be there like 3 hours by yourself and you never really talk to any like minded people. And I just wanted to be able to connect with more musicians that did similar things to me. And so eventually, like a few years later, it really started picking up. And so by 2013, I think it sort of really started to explode. A lot more people started to come to Berlin and do exactly what I was doing, which was to just share the music on the street. And and then things changed. I think I really, because I was doing really well, I really saw it as an opportunity to just live of street music actually. And so I didn't actually want to do anything else. I just wanted to be a musician from the time I finished school. But then you know how it is. Like my parents were like, "You should study something," and so I studied music for a year at a private university, and I studied music management and songwriting. And yeah, so I satisfied my parents in that way, I suppose. And then I just continued doing music.
Since I've known you, your life has been like busking all over Europe. So then how did you kind of like go, I think I need to get out of this city and go and explore some new places?
So the thing was, when busking sort of exploded in Berlin and there were so many musicians, especially in the summer, so Warschauer Straße, I used to go there every evening pretty much. And then by the summer of 2013, all of a sudden, sometimes there were queues of like 6 hours to play one set. And so I thought, well, that's not really very time efficient, and it's not really financially that lucrative to be waiting such a long period of time to just play one set. And then by that time, the set, like ideally, there's like certain time slots that are favorable because like more people are out or people are in a better mood. The later, usually, I found, for example, if I play after 10 p.m., people are rowdy and drunk and they don't usually tip very well. And so these are, all of those sorts of things are things to be considered. And of course, if you're trying to make an income from music, those things will affect um, your mindset. And so I decided to start pursuing like touring and just going to other countries and cities and just doing performing arts festivals around Europe. So I first started doing the Avignon Festival in the south of France. I think that was 2014. Yeah. And and also that same year I think I went to Edinburgh Fringe Festival for the first time. And and then I did places in between, like just busking on the street, just rocking up and just setting up wherever I felt comfortable. And yeah, that was a really cool time to be able to travel. And yeah, I did that for many years.
Hello.
Hello.
It's your Artwork podcast hosts briefly interrupting this episode. We hope you're enjoying this conversation and feeling really inspired by this story.
We'd just like to remind you that the Artwork podcast is a completely independent project, and we'd really appreciate your help in spreading the word. You can support us by subscribing, leaving a comment or review, and sharing the podcast with your friends.
We'd also like to invite you to take part in the artwork conversation by joining our Artwork Community Facebook group. There, you will be able to connect with the artists we have featured on the podcast and share your journey with like-minded creatives.
We can't wait to see you there. Let's get back to the conversation.
Thank you.
So you really take like a very DIY, do-it-yourself approach to your music and your performances. I just want to know like why you chose that route and not, the traditional route of like going to labels, and what made you just do it yourself, do these tours, busk on the street, this very DIY brand.
Well, back in the day, I actually was approached by Universal a couple times. But I found out very quickly that they didn't want me. They didn't want my music. They wanted to mold me into something that I wasn't. Like, they actually said to me, and I quote, "We want you to be a female version of Jason Mraz, happy, feel good kind of music." And I said to them, "Did you ever listen to my music? I write my own songs." Like, they're the opposite of that. I like to write melancholic songs, and I can't see myself turning into a Jason Mraz version. And so I just found that it was more important to me to stay true to my art and true to myself. And so I just decided that pursuing a label wasn't what I wanted at the time. And it was going really well for me, and I was really enjoying this free lifestyle that I had. So I think I didn't want to compromise that, and by being told what to do by a label, because that would have really restricted me in a lot of ways. And I was just really happy with how it was going at the time.
We won the battle, but I lost the war. Now there's nothing left we're fighting for. You said that we just didn't make more than you were offering. You got your easy way out, while you left me bare. All my emotions used up and none left to spare. Don't get me wrong, I'll move on, and I do wish you well after all you have done. And I know it's about time that we say goodbye.
I wondered whether you could share with us any beautiful memories you have of playing on the street. Are there any moments that really stand out for you that gave you the affirmation or the confirmation that, yes, this is why I do this. This is why I sing on the street?
I mean, there's a lot of moments that I can recall. I think one, for example, was maybe 5 years ago. I was busking at Warschauer Straße, and it was like a sunset set, and there was this man in the audience who just listened. He sat down on the concrete, and he just listened to my whole set, and then he came to me after the show, and he just thanked me in such a heartfelt way, and he told me that that day he was like really low because he just had to fire his like best friend from his job. Like his manager made him fire his best friend, and that probably meant that their friendship was also ruined, and he didn't know what he was going to do with himself that day if he would have potentially, yeah, he was really lost and didn't know what to do. And then he listened to my set, and it really gave him so much calmness and clarity that it really gave him a new perspective. And I think, we don't realize how our music affects people. And so it's those moments, when people share their story and they share how you have moved them and given them so much back, that really make it worthwhile. I think this is why we do it, because I think music really connects to people on such an emotional level, and to see that it really does move people and potentially changes their life, that is such a powerful thing.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I always because when I used to busk in Berlin, I have to admit it wasn't really for me. I think I found it very nerve-wracking, and maybe I'd like to team up with you at some point, Alice, and go back out and give it another go. But there were still some really beautiful moments that I experienced along the way, but it's funny when you're playing on the street, because some people are really thankful, and they don't mind making eye contact, and they'll give you a smile and give you a nod, good job. And then you have people who feel very strange of oh my God, I don't want to give them money, so just don't look. And then you have the children that just start dancing, and so many different people respond in different ways. And it's so interesting for me. It's like a social experiment. But I didn't necessarily mind if people didn't put money in my guitar bag, but I really appreciate it if people made eye contact and acknowledged that I was there, and
smile,
that they appreciated that I was making some sound as they walked through the city. But yeah, it's funny kind of seeing how different people react to you being there, isn't it?
For sure. Yeah, I love kids' reactions. It's so cute. Them just staring at you wide-eyed, just
Yeah.
so in awe with what you do. And it's I always love how kids always go up to their parents and ask them for money to give you. Oftentimes.
Yeah.
It's kids are sometimes more generous, in just they understand how the how it should be valued. They want to give you something because they think it's worth it. And it's interesting how, like, adults, like, yeah, they can just consume, stand there for an hour and then just walk away without giving a cent. And yeah, to just have that difference is very interesting, I find. Not about the money, because, like, I don't care if you don't have money to give, but I think it's more about appreciating the art. Like, I much rather have somebody come up to me after a show and say to me, I'm really sorry I don't have any money to give you, but I just wanted to congratulate you and tell you that you really moved me, and just give you some sort of personal, thanks instead of financial thanks. I don't necessarily care about that, but it's more like the coward way of just walking away and sort of not validating, like not appreciating you in any way whatsoever, like neither verbal nor financially.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it makes it worthwhile to know that it's been heard and it's been appreciated. Because it's a challenge. It's a hard thing for a person to just like unpack their equipment on the side of the street and just hope that and share their heart, be vulnerable in front of strangers just walking by.
It takes so much bravery, really, really does.
What kind of opportunities came your way just by singing your songs on streets around the world?
Probably most of the opportunities I've been given have come through busking, actually. I think connecting in the way you do, and just reaching the people the way you are, as directly as you are on the streets. Um, there's a lot of people that do have a lot of respect for that. And back in the day, like, there was like a lot of like newspaper articles about me, and I did a lot of like, um, also radio interviews and like playing live on the radio as well, and those sorts of things all came through busking. And and so through that, there was like, then, by this newspaper called Bitset, they did a video of me, and they then uploaded it to YouTube, and it has like, I'm not sure, like upwards of 100,000 plays, and it's like the most played video from their newspaper agency on YouTube. So that really reached a lot of people, I guess, and through that, I had other people approach me, and yeah, a lot of gigs offered to me through busking, and yeah, so a lot of opportunities, I'd say.
So, would you recommend it as a way, like for musicians who maybe, especially now during COVID, can't get typical gigs in venues, or would you recommend busking as a way to kind of get started and just because I also think it's a great way to hone your craft as well. Like it's a great way to perform to practice your songs, to get better at your music, to kind of do some research about what songs you've written that people are attracted to and which ones don't draw so much attention. Like, I feel like you can learn a lot. Would you recommend it as a way to get started?
I definitely think that if you're a good street performer, like, it's only ever gonna make you better as a performer. I've actually talked to a lot of venue owners and bookers, and like, they love to book street musicians because they know if you can perform well on the streets, you're almost always gonna give a great performance on stages as well. And I think having that exposure to that many different kind of people and age groups really does challenge you in a good way, and it pushes you to be a lot better at performing. So I definitely encourage people to do busk, but at the same time, when you first go out busking, yeah, it can be very discouraging, like you said, Brie. But I think it's like, it might be good to go out with a friend when you do it for the first time, or just, have somebody there that gives you a certain level of comfort, potentially. Because, yeah, you don't know what kind of people you're going to meet out there, and just to have somebody there that you trust, that you know is going to have your back just in case, I think that can really help. And then yeah, I think busking has a lot of potential, but at the same time there are certain risks associated with it, like the police might shut you down because it's not technically legal. Then on top of that, right now is not a really good time to start busking. First of all, because it's freezing, and second of all, because the lockdown, you're not actually allowed to be playing on the street because it's not an essential reason to be outside. So like I haven't actually been able to busk since December. Hopefully once it all loosens up a bit, we're going to be able to do those things again.
Yeah, so you've mentioned, having a friend with you and having someone you trust there. When we can go out to the streets and busk again, what are some other tips and advice you'd give to people who want to give it a go?
I think first of all, try to get yourself in a good headspace before you start. And then second of all, don't let yourself be discouraged by anybody around you, because people can be pretty harsh as well, or just indifferent. And I think not necessarily having any sort of feedback or feeling valued or appreciated can really, affect you mentally. So just try to have sort of low expectations. Try to practice maybe even setting up at home, get a bit of a routine before you first go out, because you don't want to have to fuck around with all the gear for the very first time when you're out there on the streets in an environment you don't know. Um, have at least like a solid set list that you can play. Have at least, I don't know, 40, 50 minutes worth of material that you can play comfortably. Because when you're out there in this environment that you're not familiar with, like it's just going to stress you out more. And if you then don't really know what you're doing, like that can also, of course, affect your performance. So I think, practice your art, practice at home, of course. I mean, this is a perfect time to do those things. And then when you're ready, then just try to stay positive and try not to be discouraged. And take a friend if you can. If not, you'll be all right. It's in the end of the day, like, I think you do have to have a certain level of not giving a fuck. Like you can't really let other people really dictate the way you feel. Like you really do have to like sort of grow a bit of a thicker skin, and sort of also set clear boundaries, because there is people out there who's going to try to push your buttons, or like sort of. So just be gentle. Like just I always try to just de-escalate situations if I can. Just try to be nice to people, um, and usually that works out almost all of the time. So
You also mentioned in your bio that playing on the streets has really shaped your music and your performing. I wondered if you could explain that to us, of how did playing on the streets shape the music that you wrote, or the style of music that you play? What do you mean by that?
in a lot of ways, when you play songs on the street, you sort of see people's reaction, and so you can sort of start to judge your own maybe potential new material by the way people react, like whether or not it's a good song, if it works on the street. And so I think that's one factor that definitely affects your songwriting or your performing. And then on top of that, especially if you're out in the streets and there's a lot of noise levels, you'll have to adapt and project your voice, for example, in a different way. So I actually have developed quite a powerful voice because I had to, because sometimes you're in a really loud environment and you have to try to overpower that. And so, but at the same time, if you're in a quieter environment, of course you can sing softer. But I think having this dynamic to your advantage that you can use is something that I've learned through busking, definitely.
You are my kryptonite, and no matter how far away someone else becomes my kryptonite, and someone else becomes my kryptonite.
From the time that I've known you, really all you've done is play music, play music, play music. And you've been so committed and you've worked so hard. And since I've known you, you've just traveled the world. And I think it's such an encouragement for artists to see people like you. You've just you've set your determination in a direction and you've just made it happen.
Definitely.
And people have helped you along the way. Maybe you've stayed in people's homes or people have invited you to play in their town or something like that. But you've actually built a really successful music career for yourself just by doing it your way. And I think that that's really, really inspiring. I wondered if you wanted to tell us a little bit more of like the places you've been and maybe what it was like. Did people invite you to stay at their homes? How did you kind of organize these tours? Did you just pick cities on the map that you wanted to play in? Was there any kind of method or plan?
I guess in a certain way there is a bit of a method to the madness. I actually used to be very spontaneous when it comes to um, going places because sometimes I'd even decide like to 2 or 1 day in advance, and I'd be like, "Oh, it's gonna rain for the next 2 weeks in Berlin. I'm just gonna book a flight to Paris and just gonna go there, or to Rome or wherever." That's the great thing about being a street performer, being able to make money wherever you can. I think that's what I always liked about it, having this free lifestyle and being able to, yeah, just do what you love in different places around the world. And yeah, I've seen a lot of places. I've usually always I'd spend like at least like a month or two every year in France, just in different places, like all around France, pretty much. I have like my favorite spots to come back to, but I mix it up as well. And like usually for the last I think 5 years, I've spent, yeah, at least like 1 month a year in Paris, and I really love Paris. It's a great place. I think like people like us that have sort of like a more mellow music really get appreciated there. So yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like you never know how your music is gonna be received because like every single place you play, and also not only just the city that you're in, but also the daytime and the sort of season you're in and what sort of day of the week it is, all of those factors really like make a difference to how you're received. So I like to play at sunset usually because people, or like let's say from the afternoon, because people are more calm. I don't like to play during rush hour business time because people don't usually have the time to really listen to you. And so those sorts of things like definitely affect where you feel comfortable. I also don't usually like to play in too busy malls or anything like that because I think, you know, the whole capitalistic approach of consuming and not necessarily appreciating what you're consuming definitely affects also the way people respond to your music potentially.
Mm.
Um, so I try to play in places that I just feel right to me, you know, just open. I like open spaces where people have space to stand around and form a crowd if they want to. Um, and also, like, potentially nice backdrops are always nice. I've
Mm.
spent a lot of time in Australia as well, and of course, there's a lot of great beaches and a lot of like great nature, as well as New Zealand is fantastic also for busking. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of lovely places out there that I have enjoyed traveling to, and I'm really excited to hopefully do it again.
What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned along the way in your music journey, and especially playing street music?
I think no matter what life throws at you, to just continue, like, just being determined about your goals and about what you want to do, and not letting any outside factors affect you. I think that was like the main thing for
Mm.
me.
So, what are your dreams and hopes? I want to say goals, but and plans, but I feel like what are plans anymore? What are your hopes and your dreams for the future of your career? And yeah, what do you want to do next? What's on the cards? What are you hoping for?
So at the moment, since we don't know when we can play gigs again, I'm sort of for the moment focusing more on my jewelry brand as well. And also, I recorded like a new EP in December, and that's going to be released soon. I don't have a release date just yet, but I think the way it's going to be, I think next month I'm going to release a single out of the EP, and then the month after that, I'm going to release another single, and then I think by the end of that month, I'm going to release the EP like fully. So that is like the next things on my list. And I think just focusing a bit more on recording this year, because I don't really know whether anything else is really possible at the moment, at least while we can't play gigs. So I guess just focusing on recording, building my jewelry brand up a bit more and focusing a bit more time on that.
Mhm.
That's my.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit more about your jewelry brand. How did it start? What materials do you use? Where can we find it? Tell us all about that.
So I started back about a year ago, actually, when I was in New Zealand. I was in Wellington. I just arrived in Wellington, and the room that me and Alex Coast Ocean took over to live in was previously inhabited by a jewelry maker. And so I just asked her a bunch of questions, how she got started, what tools she used, because this was something I was always interested in, but I guess I just never had the time, or like, yeah, I just never actually started doing it. And so she gave me some tips and like a shop where I could find all the different appliances that I needed. So I went out there, and the first jewelry I made was actually made from stones and rocks I found up on a hike in New Zealand, on close to Queenstown on the South Island, and like a lot of quartzes I found there. And so I started making sort of macrame style jewelry with like threads, like, and so that's how I got started. Then eventually I moved away from that and I started making more wire jewelry. And so at first I was using rocks that I found, and then I moved on buying rocks in, crystal shops and such. And I think something that was always really important to me was that every single piece of jewelry was unique. So I use all sorts of different stones, and I write, yeah, the properties of the stones on there, and try to make it a bit personal as well. And I'm actually very inspired by you, Poppy, and how you
Oh,
did it. And I think to see that somebody did that, and yeah, that really inspired me. So I think in a lot of ways, I took a lot of inspiration from you. And so, yeah, that's how I started.
oh, that means a lot. Thank you so much. That's so special as well that you started off using pieces that you found. That's so special and like so personal. I started doing a collection with some glass, like that had been tumbled down the river near where my parents live. And it's so fun when you find a really beautiful piece just on the ground, and then you take it home and you give it a polish and a clean, and then a few moments later or a few hours later, you're wearing it as a piece of jewelry. I think it's so special, and that has that memory for you when you wear it, and when you give it to someone else, or yeah, and then they have that energy with them as well. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, that is really nice. And that's when I first started making jewelry, all of those stones that I collected, the idea behind it was that to make it really personal, and like I'd always write on the cards where I found them and when I turned them into a jewelry piece, and then also the properties on top of that. And I think, yeah, just making it personal is really nice, is a nice touch.
I have a question kind of for both of you in like, and especially Alice, in you've kind of had this push to adapt to this new situation now that you aren't able to make money in the normal way that you have for the last 10 years. How has it been for you to adapt to doing something else? And has your online following, who may have found you through music, have they been supportive in accepting like this new channel of creativity that you're offering now?
I think it did. Um, at the same time, I haven't been as active this year as I have usually, like in previous years. Well, like 2020, that is, because I didn't really have much to share, to be honest. Because like usually, of course, when you're like on the road, like you take pictures and it's easier to create content. But if you're just sitting on the sofa every day, it's like not so exciting to share that with people. And so, yeah, I sort of was like a bit uninspired for a while there last year, especially during the lockdowns, to do much social media. But at the same time, I still created a lot, like music and jewelry. And I still have a lot of those things that I now just need to upload into the shops. Um, so, yeah, it's definitely been challenging. I also did like a few live stream concerts, um, but I do feel like I definitely miss performing in front of a live audience, like having this immediate connection. And then, like until December, I was still able to busk, so that was really nice to still have that at least. Now I don't, so I'm
Mm.
considering potentially starting a Patreon or something similar to just give people regular updates and create content in a way that is sustainable, because I think it's really hard to make music, like make money from music, especially online. Like, because like a lot of money we used to make used to be from touring and concerts, and now that we don't have that, just making money from streaming is not really an option. So we have to find different avenues to bring our music to people and connect with audiences in a different way, which is challenging, but
Mm.
yeah, that's what it is at the moment, so we've got to make do.
I think Patreon is a really, really good idea, and it's such a great
Yeah.
platform for that. It's yeah, because the audience can pay monthly subscriptions, and like be a patron for different artists and creatives, and then the artist and creator gets a little bit of money every month, and then you can or maybe a lot of money, who knows, some money, and then you can create more content because you have the resources. And I think it's such a amazing platform for independent artists. So I think you should definitely set that up.
Yeah. I was so close to
Mm.
do that like for a few years now, but yeah, I will actually. I
Just
will
do it. Just
eventually.
do it.
Actually, I realized I didn't actually get back to your question, Brie. So considering like my fans and how they have reacted to it, I think I am very fortunate that I do have like at least you know not that many, but some really really loyal followers that have been supporting me for years and that are always supporting me if they can. And like I'm very grateful for those people. And then you know how it is, it's difficult with the algorithms online to really reach like all the people that you have connected with or that follow you. And so that is a challenge as well, but at the same time I do really appreciate the people that do connect with me still and that do support me still.
Mm. I think that's also a reminder of just like how I think you shared something on your social media the other day of saying that like you giving me like a monthly donation for Patreon, or you buying a necklace from me, or you ordering a record from me is such a big deal that it actually gives me the chance to pursue my dream. Or maybe, I'm not sure if that was you or another creative shared that. And I realized that, yeah, that's so true. These people who we meet along the way, who just become such ambassadors for us and who encourage us and always support us when we release new music, or, come to our gigs or buy our products online. The significance of their role in our lives as a creative is really big. And, if any listeners out there have been supporting independent artists, maybe you support musicians or other artists that you've kind of found over the years. Your support and your encouragement means a lot.
Definitely.
So
definitely.
For sure.
earlier in the episode, you offered some advice for people who wanted to maybe try street music. But I wondered if you would have any advice for artists in general, or for people in general, that you have kind of held close to your heart over the years, that's encouraged you, that you would like to share with us.
I think being authentic and being true to yourself, most and foremost as an artist, and about your craft, about your songwriting and your performing, keeping that in mind is like the most important thing. And then also always be nice to people, be courteous, especially when you're busking or performing. I think the reputation that we built is, very important in the business, because if you have a bad reputation, nobody's going to want to work with you. Then networking is really important, and just, being as professional as you can be at any given time. I think these are things that I always cared very much about. And just not letting what other people say affect you so much. Like, I struggle with that too, but I think in the end of the day, as long as you're happy with your progress and what you're doing, there's always, you can always improve, but just try to be grateful for where you're at the moment. And, you can always get better, or you can always ask people for help that might know more in a certain field. And I think that is a very important thing as well. Do connect with people that challenge you, that are potentially better. Expose yourself to situations that maybe sometimes make you uncomfortable, because I think real growth only comes from discomfort. And so going to those open mics, being exposed to people that do similar music to you, or even very different music from you. I think listening to a performer, seeing a performer, and then trying to analyze what they do, like, you can always learn something from every performer you see, whether it's good or bad, whether it's something you can do or what not to do. I think there's a lot of things to consider, and just try to take inspiration from the right people, and to surround yourself with people that push you to be better at what you do is very important.
You just blasted me with so many words of wisdom that I'm just like, I'm ready to take on the
I
world.
feel so inspired now.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
Oh, Alice, thank you so much for joining us for an artwork conversation today.
Thank you for making it happen, girls. This is a really important thing that you're doing. I know I will talk to you again soon. But we'll be in touch. And thank you for everybody that listened.
Yeah.
Try to stay strong during this challenging time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode.
If you'd like to be a part of the Artwork conversation, we would love to invite you to join our Artwork Community Facebook group, where you can connect with the artists we featured on the podcast and share your journey with a like-minded community. You can find the link in the show notes, as well as all the links to today's artist.
If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would take the time to subscribe to and review it so that more people can find us in the future. Your comments can help us pop up on more people's suggested podcasts, helping our artist stories reach a wider audience.
Podcasts are best spread by word of mouth, so if you know people who might enjoy this episode or the Artwork podcast as a whole, we would love it if you told them all about it.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at art.workconversation.
And tune in next week for another inspiring episode.
Bye!
Bye.